If you want to pump your body and expand your mind, there's only one place to go. Mind Pump. Mind Pump with your hosts, Sal DiStefano, Adam Schafer, and Justin Andrews.
Imagine how much of a badass you have to be to get hired by Gary Vee.
Oh, to be his trainer, his only trainer,
Right.
all the time.
Right.
Well, you're such a badass that, I mean, how big is Jordan Syatt? And he squats like more, squats and deadlifts more weight than I think any two of us combined.
I know we talk about our good buddy Mike, how unassuming he is. When you see him, you wouldn't realize. Jordan is like that.
Same thing.
Yes.
Just incredibly strong, super friendly, super smart trainer. He's one of the better
Very
trainers.
approachable.
One of the things
out there.
one of the things I really appreciate about his content that he puts out too is, even though he's incredibly intelligent and smart, he doesn't talk over his audience. And this to me is what makes a really good trainer. It's one thing to have the experience and the knowledge and the ability to break down almost anything or have conversations around almost any topic around fitness, but to be able to communicate that in a fashion that the average person can consume it and learn from it and make changes in their life. This is what drew me to him and why I was so excited to invite him down to the studio. It's also why we not only had him in the studio, which is something we don't always do, we had him do a series on YouTube. So you can also go to the YouTube channel and watch the series of videos that we're releasing with him too.
Yeah, this is Mind Pump TV. But yeah, we think you're going to really enjoy this episode. Again, he's a trainer that we really, really respect. He has his own YouTube channel, Jordan Syatt. Syatt is spelled S-Y-A-T-T. Of course, you can go on our channel, Mind Pump TV, to watch the series that we recorded with him. He has a website as well, SyattFitness.com. And then you can also find him on Instagram at Syatt Fitness. Also, before we get into the episode, if you're catching this episode right when it's released, there's only a few hours left for the MAP Strong 50% off sale. Now remember, MAP Strong is one of our most effective muscle building and metabolism boosting programs to date. It's half off. Hopefully you got here in time. Just go to mapsstrong.com, MAPSSTRONG.com, and use the code STRONG50, STRONG50, no space, for the discount. So that's it. Without any further ado, here we are talking to Jordan Syatt. So you were just saying you've been training for a long time.
Since 14?
14 years old.
Yeah, so I was wrestling my whole life. I started wrestling when I was 8 years old, and that's how I got into fitness and everything. And then basically when I got to be a freshman in high school, I made varsity, and I had to cut from 112 to 103 pounds. So that was like, and I had no idea what I was doing. But basically, so I started to look into nutrition and strength training, and I was small, and I was a freshman, so I was going up against juniors and seniors, and I had to figure out, well, how do I go up against these people? How do I increase my strength and everything while cutting weight? So I found a gym near me that specialized in kettlebells. And basically I was like, hey, I'll clean the floors, I'll take the trash out, whatever. Can I just intern here? And so they were like, yeah, absolutely. So I did that when I was 14. And then from throughout all of high school, worked with them and started coaching with them. And that's what I did. That was my first personal
Now,
training job.
Now kettlebells at this point, we're talking what, 10 years ago, maybe more?
Yeah, that was when they were first, becoming popular.
2005. It was 2005 when I...
Yeah, because they weren't even that I remember, let's see here, 2002, probably like 2003 or 4 when I was a trainer was like the first time I'd even seen a kettlebell, even heard anyone use it. And like
RKC was huge then.
Right,
yeah. RKC, Pavel, Dragon Door, that was kind of sweeping. The
only times I saw kettlebells were in the old time pictures of old strongmen with the, and then all of a sudden you see these guys working out with them, like, what the hell?
So what interested you in that? I mean, at that point in your career, because I remember the first time I'd seen it, I wasn't even that interested until RKC, and then I remember seeing the price for it, and I was like, oh, fuck.
Yeah.
I don't know, man.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
Yeah, I don't know how many of my clients will use this. What turned you on to the kettlebells?
So I was super fortunate because I had some amazing wrestling coaches, really tremendous ones who were also really into fitness. I started doing intermittent fasting when I was in high school because of them too.
Wow.
And my high school had an amazing gym, like tremendous, and they had kettlebells. I was like, what are these cannonballs with handles on it? And one of the wrestling coaches was certified in RKC, and so he was super adamant about making sure all the wrestlers were using them. And basically, once he started having me do it, I was like, I'm obsessed with this. And so then I literally searched for a kettlebell gym in the area and found one a couple towns over. And that was sort of how, and they were through a different certification. It was called Punch Kettlebell Gym. I forget who they went through, but they had one of the trainers, Stacy Shadler. She had RKC and something else, and the other guy, Kevin, wow, I forget his last name now, but he also had RKC too.
Now, what were some of the things that you noticed right away when you started training with kettlebells, like as far as the transfer into your sport and what you were doing?
I think for me at that time, it was much more of a higher repetition endurance-based thing. I think that was one of the faults of the coaching at that time. It was far less about getting stronger and more about just doing it for the entire length of a wrestling match, for example. Yeah, so it's like, well, you have to go 6 minutes, so you better do swings for 6 minutes type things. And so I was understanding the movement, and I was understanding hip hinges, I was understanding that side of training, but there's only so much strength you can do with a kettlebell at a certain point. Like, you can't, there's only times you can deadlift a 24 kilogram, 32 kilogram, 48 kilogram before you're actually starting to get stronger, or you sort of limit it. So I think I really got into it from that end, but I don't think I started to get really stronger until I started getting into more barbell work, which was more along junior and senior year.
Do you think that's a big mistake a lot of coaches make, where they try to mimic the sport so much with the weights that they turn a tool that is really good for strength into something else, like almost using a hammer to screw in a screw?
I think it's one of the biggest mistakes in general is to like everything has to be 100% specific to what you're doing. I mean, you see people like, for example, I've seen coaches take golfers to a cable machine and try and mimic their golf swing with a cable. I'm like, that's just a really stupid idea. It's just not. And I understand their reasoning, like why that they were like, well, that would make sense, but practically it doesn't play out, and it's probably going to end up leading to creating some issues with the swing along the way. So I think that there's strength, and then there's also, you can create strength in the movement direction, in that movement pattern, but like you don't have to do it all exactly the same. You can do them separately.
Yeah, in fact, sometimes it throws your timing off if you try to add resistance to a movement pattern that you do in your sport.
Exactly.
Because of the resistance.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, were you training people at this point also, or is this just your workouts?
So I was training people.
Wow.
I was doing it on my own for sure. I remember in class, and like I remember in Mr. Ray's class, I would be writing programs for Mr. Ray's English class. I'd be writing programs for like kids my age.
And you're like a teenager at this point?
Yeah, I was a teenager.
Wow.
I was obsessed. I was absolutely obsessed. And I was lucky because I was surrounded by coaches who were incredibly trusting and incredibly like inspiring, and they sort of inundated me into this science-based industry at a very young age. I didn't spend too much time in the magazines or on like bullshit websites. Like, they really helped me. Eric Cressy, Pavel, Dan John, from a very young age, all these like really amazing people. And so I would write them programs when I wasn't at the gym. And then the first thing they had me do was they let me lead the warm-up. So they're like, we had a class of people. They'd be like, okay, Jordan's going to lead the warm-up. And it was incredible because they never introduced me as the intern or the high school kid. They're always like, all right, this is Coach Jordan. He's going to lead the warm-up, which was incredible because it sort of, to hear that they thought of me as a coach sort of allowed me to sort of live up to that expectation, as opposed to, they're like, this is the intern, I have that expectation, but by saying I'm a coach, I have to live up to being a coach, which really I think elevated me early on.
Wow. And so after you did the kettlebell training, was there another phase to your training later on? Did you learn other, I mean, you obviously did, I know your story, but what came after that?
So after that, it was basically I was doing kettlebells, and then I went into barbells, and then I really got into powerlifting. So I was in high school, I was doing the kettlebells, and then during high school, junior, senior year, I started getting into barbell training, but then I went to Israel for a year after high school. I took a year off, just traveled for a year, and I really basically just used a kettlebell for the entire year I was away, but I really was missing the barbell. So when I got back, that's when I got super into powerlifting, and I ended up training at Westside Barbell for a little bit, training at Cressy Performance. And then I was just like obsessed with barbell training.
Wow. And you trained at Westside for a long time, right?
I was there for about 4 months. It wasn't like that long. But
you
it was
literally
enough.
were trained by Louis, right?
Yeah, 2 times a day, 4 days a week, one time. So it was 11 training sessions a week. My total went up by 300 pounds in 4 months.
So, okay, so let's talk about this for a second. What? Because they are one of the most, if not the most well-known powerlifting, I guess, gym in the world, or philosophy, structure, if you will.
Yeah, that's where you go.
What is it that makes them so successful?
Man, what is it? I mean, I'll be honest. I've never seen a group of people more consistent of the training, and it's one of the things where you could say, well, the system is extraordinary, and the system is the best system, and there's nothing better. But I don't think it's that. I think it's these people literally put training above anything and everything else. Like on Thanksgiving, they're in the gym. On Christmas, and they're in the gym. On their birthdays, they're in the gym. Like, they don't miss it. Like, they'll miss work for it. I mean, Louis is so funny because Louis is like a father to me. He's a really extraordinary guy. And he was like, I told my wife when I first met her, I was like, powerlifting comes first. And she's so sweet because she like supports him and she's like, I know. And she's just like, and she supports him in it. And he's like, lifting comes first. And that's also why you see significant burnout from a lot of those lifters too. Like they'll be there hardcore 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. Then they sort of stop off after that. I mean, aside from the toll it takes on their body. But I mean, within that time frame that they're there, they explode. It's crazy.
And you said your total went up 300 pounds. What were your lifts? How much did you weigh and what were your lifts?
I remember the first day I went in there, I was 127 pounds, soaking wet. And Brandon Lilly was there at the time. And he goes, I'm going to be honest, man, I thought you were a cross-country runner. And I was like, well, thanks, man, I appreciate it. And it was funny because when I went there, my expectation was going to be that I was going to gain a ton of weight because that's what Westside is, like, get fucking huge. Like, that's it. Everybody there was trying to get me to gain weight except for Louis. Louis was like, I don't want you to gain weight. I want you to compete at 132 and I want you to crush 132. And Louis had sort of been challenged, which is one of the reasons I got there is because someone called Louis out and was like, Louis, you suck. You only train heavyweights. You only train big fat dudes. Like, you could never train a lighter guy. And so then he sees me, and I had a pretty good deadlift at the time. And so he was like,
Yeah, how did you get his attention?
So that was a story. Basically, actually, I still have the voicemail from him on my phone, but basically, I was obsessed with Louis. It's sort of like when you watch Louis' videos for the first time, it's sort of like you're so captivated, and you can see how he creates this like cult following because he's just saying all this crazy stuff. You're like, oh, bands and chains, like, oh my god, like dynamic effort. It's for the first time, you're like, oh my god, this is amazing. And so I contacted him because I read an article from him saying I'm looking for a lightweight lifter, and I was like, I wrote him an email, sort of just like I did with that kettlebell gym. I was like, hey man, I'll come, I'll take the trash out, I'll clean the gym, just let me come train. And he responded, literally all he wrote was, our weakest guy squats 800 pounds. What do you have to offer? And so I responded. I was like, oh man, I can either just try and be super polite or I can go for broke. And I remember I wrote back. I was like, I don't give a fuck what your weakest guy does, what your strongest guy does. I'll outwork you and every lifter you have.
Oh, wow.
That was your response?
That was my response.
What a great answer.
And he called me, but I didn't have his phone number, so I ignored it. It was just like I saw a Columbus, Ohio number. I ignored it. I was in the dining hall. I was in the Pencader Dining Hall, University of Delaware. And then I get a voicemail, and I'm walking out with my buddy Kyle, and I listen to the voicemail, and he's like, Jordan, this is Louis Simmons. I was like, holy shit. And I still have that voicemail. And he's like, I want you to come to Westside. We'll interview you. We'll see how you do, and we'll go from there. And so I called him the next day, and we had a 45-minute call. And I flew out with my mom. This was my freshman year. And so my mom's like the sweetest, nicest Jewish mother. Like, she doesn't know what we're getting into when we go to Westside. Yeah. I'm pretty sure she's the only like sweet, nice Jewish mother who's ever walked into Westside.
Oh, she was with you.
She was with me. And like, and
Were
so
you 16, 17?
No, so I was in college at this point. So I was 19.
Okay.
But I mean, 127 pounds.
Yeah.
And she just doesn't know what she's about to walk into. Nobody gets what Westside is like. It's not like you don't have a key card. It's not like they're giving you like a eucalyptus towel.
There's gorillas in there.
Like, it is. I mean, it's their weakest guy squats 800 pounds.
Yeah.
So we go in, and Louis, he sees me from across the gym, and his nose is gushing blood. And he's shirtless, and he's tattooed head to toe. He's got the big dog with the chain around his neck, on his tattooed on his stomach. And he walks up, he's like, Jordan? I was like, yeah. He's like, great. And then he just like, let's start working out. And so basically he goes, all right, so you're going to start off with deadlifts. And I was like, okay, like how many sets, how many reps, how much weight? He's like, as heavy as possible until it hurts too much. And I was like,
and your mom's like, let's go.
Yeah. See you later, son.
She left. And so I'll tell you that in a minute. So then I was like, what's next? He's like, rack pulls. I was like, all right, how much weight, how many sets and reps? He's like, as heavy as possible until it hurts too much. Go. Literally. And then I was like, okay, what's next? He's like, glute ham raises, as heavy as possible until it hurts too much. Everything, the entire session. So I get through literally bleeding, like just destroyed beyond belief. And I go outside to my mom's car, and she's in tears. And we go to this Bob Evans restaurant and like get some breakfast, and she's like, I don't want you to come. Like, I'm scared. Because it's just like surrounded by these huge dudes. And so did that for 2 days, and everything for 2 days was as heavy as possible, go until it hurts too much. And then he was, at the end of it, he was like, I'll see you over the summer. And
that was your interview.
That was my interview for 2 days. Yeah, 2 days of that. And then thank God, my mom let me do it. She let me do it, and she helped me out. She helped like fund me going. And granted, Ohio is super inexpensive, but like she helped fund me go. And thank God she did. And so I was there for 4 months, and total went up by like 300 pounds.
Now, what were you that day when you came in? What were you pulling when you first got there?
Man, I wish I remembered. If I had to guess, I think I was pulling. I believe my best at that point was either 355 or 365. And I was like 127, and I hadn't spent that much time doing it, which I think Louis was like, all right, this is good because
a lot of potential.
Yeah, a lot of potential. And then by the end of it, I was pulling well into the 400s.
Wow, that's insane.
Now, do you remember some of the first major critiques or things that he started to work with you on that made that started to make a big difference in the direction towards the 300?
I think the biggest thing was, and I think this is one of the biggest misconceptions of Westside, is everyone sees Westside and they look at the first movement and they're like, you max every week. And that's all they think that Westside is. They think that Westside is you just max. And so you look at all these lifters trying to do Westside, and they spend 45 minutes to an hour and 15 minutes working up to a max every week, and then they sort of just nix the accessory work. It's just, that's the complete opposite. Like, you work up to a daily max, to like what you can do that day, which shouldn't take that long. It shouldn't take up a massive portion of time. The majority of your workout is your accessory work, and he's really big on like a lot of volume and building you up to it. Not right from the get, but there's a lot of volume and a lot of accessory work, and I think that above all else, I mean, obviously major focus on posterior chain, hamstrings, and glutes, but it was you work up to that daily max, and then you blast the hell out of your hamstrings with glute ham raises, pull throughs, kettlebell swings, RDLs, rack pulls. It's just a ton of volume.
Wow.
And so I think, and I had never done that much volume before, and I think like really pushing yourself to a point where it's like, I don't know if I could do this for a long period of time, but for 4 months, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it seems like, especially with a lot of people like yourself who get really, really serious about training, there's different phases to your training, like different schools. Like you did your kettlebells, you did your powerlifting. Was there something that followed, or did you stay in that powerlifting zone for forever?
So my goal, I wanted to deadlift 4 times my body weight. So I was there until that happened, which was several years. It was the better part of the next 4 or 5 years. And so I hit 535 at 132.
Wow.
And then after that, I was like, I'm done.
Wow.
I was like, literally, I put the bar down. You can see it. There's a video of it on YouTube. I just put the bar down. I was like, I'm done. Wow. And then I went sort of back to my MMA, like went back to more Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu wrestling training. And so I spent the next amount of time really just training for that and doing more conditioning. And my strength stayed up for a long time until then I went and started coaching Gary. And that's when sort of my training sort of took a huge back seat just because I didn't have any time. It was a major difference.
Now, what were some of the things you noticed? When we first got together and the three of us all met, Sal was like the big deadlifter, and I'd never really put any, like you, like I had deadlifted before, but it was like intermittently thrown into my routine. I never like put effort after going after it, and I was around 300 and something. I scaled all the way to 550 was where I ended up. And along that way, I started to notice things that I'd never noticed before with my body. Like I started to get achy joints, and I was always stiff and tight somewhere. Did you notice things like this? And is that what made you kind of scale out of it?
Yeah, I mean, my labrum in my hip is screwed up still. And I can even feel it now as I'm starting to build my deadlift back up. Like that's why right now I'm deadlifting once every 7 to 10 days. Just because if I try and do it twice a week, it's going to screw me over. And I can't really back squat anymore, mainly just because I know if I go deep, it's gonna have an issue. So I do a lot of Bulgarian split squats and a lot of lunges instead because it feels good on my hips. But yeah, I mean, definitely. And plus, I did a lot of ultra wide sumo. That's why now you look at my sumo stance, it's more of a moderate stance. It's actually like just slightly outside of conventional. And I actually like that because you get a lot more push as opposed to only spreading. I think that's where a lot of people get a lot of hip pain is they spread so much so often, they just spread, and they don't get any downward push. It's a massive disadvantage. So my sumo stance now is actually very, very moderate, and so I think that helps. But absolutely, achy hips, achy joints for sure.
And then did this send you down like the rabbit hole of functional training and learning about mobility, or like where did you start to pick up some of that?
So that was actually a huge benefit. So I trained at Westside for 4 months, and then I went back to school for several months, and then I interned at Cressy Performance with Eric Cressy. So literally within a year, I interned at both of those places.
Wow.
And it was just the cool part was Eric trained at Southside Gym in Connecticut, and Eric is a massive lifter too. Eric is strong as hell, and so he has that powerlifting background. So he understands that how important strength is, and also that sort of obsession with lifting as heavy as you can, but also understands the anatomy and physiology better than anybody. And understand the first day I was at Cressy, he had me go to the whiteboard, and he goes, "I want you to name all of the muscles that attach to the scapula." And right on I was like, "Are you out of your mind?"
Rotator cuffs.
There's like 17.
Yeah.
I got like
exactly.
I got like 9 of them, and I'll never forget this. He goes, "How can you know what the body does if you don't know what the body is?" And so then from that point, he was like, "If I can recommend one thing once you're done with this, is go back to school and enroll in as many gross anatomy courses as you can." And that it's one of those things where if I was to talk to a coach now about how they can get better, I don't know if I would recommend every coach do that, because I don't know if it's that necessary for every coach to understand the body on that level. But I do think that one of the major issues coaches have today is they don't understand what the body is at all. Like they have no conception of what attaches to what causes movement where, and they're sort of programming exercises based on what they think the exercise is good for, but not necessarily understanding what that individual needs based on how they move, and it's a massive disadvantage.
Right.
Yeah,
totally.
a big thing that we see too, especially, I did this as a trainer when I first started, which was a long time ago, but you still see trainers do this, is I'm just going to put together the coolest looking, weirdest exercises and make this as fun as possible and get you really sore.
Right.
And then I think it's going to be a good workout. You still see that quite a bit.
All the time.
Yeah.
Even among coaches who like should know better. I think there's sort of like this cognitive dissonance of like, well, I know what should be better, but I also have a feeling that these clients, they are going to want this instead. And so they tend to like almost go to like, well, I'm going to do what the client wants as opposed to what they need. And it sort of creates a huge tearing on the inside of the coach, because it's like, well, I want to give them what's right for them, but I also want to make sure that they stay with me and don't go to like the other classes or whatever that might just make them sweat and not do the right thing. So I think it's really tough.
Well, you're really big in the social media space, and you've been training long enough to see how that's developed. Do you think that's helping the situation or making it worse?
I think there's a net positive for sure. I think net positive for sure, because you could get bad information anywhere, but I think the good information is also more readily available. If people want to find it, they can find it, and they'll stumble upon it. And so I think it's actually really interesting. I remember going into public gyms, whether it was Gold's gyms or New York sports clubs years ago, and just seeing what the type of training was generally going on among general pop. And I can go in now, and the training is totally different. Literally, I went into a gym the other day with Enrico, and there were people doing some belly breathing. There were people doing some specific stretches for their adductor magnus. They're doing like deadlifts. They're doing farmer's walks, single arm farmer's walks, just everyday regular people and mass within the entire gym. And I like 5 years ago, absolutely not. Like no way was this a thing. And you can see it in Men's Health and Men's Fitness and these magazines too. They're promoting these exercises. So obviously it's going to reach more people, I think. So net total by far way more positive. I think that the negativity is just a lot louder, and people focus on the negative much more than they focus on the positive. It's easier to like look at the negative and be really upset about it than it is to look at the positive and say that's awesome.
Yeah, I would agree. One of the other things too is that I'm starting to see some changes, and I'd love your opinion on this, is for a long time, and now still true, but not as much, I think, is people get in their camps. And, training becomes kind of like the religion. Like, all I do is kettlebell training. That's all I do. I'm the functional person. All my training is functional. I do bodybuilding training. That's all I do. And you're starting to see a lot more crossover now than you used to, but it's still that way. I don't know. What's your opinion on that? Yeah,
I struggled with it. When I decided I was done powerlifting, I had a huge internal struggle. Number one, because like so much of my ego, that's what it was. My ego is tied up in lifting super heavy all the time and posting videos of me doing super heavy stuff. And a lot of like my audience at that point followed me specifically because I was a power lifter. And so for me, like changing it, going into more of like a lower weight, more MMA style training, I was like, why are people going to want to follow me now? Like, why are they going to want to watch me do stuff that I had never done before? And not to mention, I had spent so much time preaching the benefits of barbell training and strength training. I was like, am I going to lose any, like, is this going to be bad for me now? And so I think you have this huge like internal struggle with that when you're trying to change your training style. But I think the way that you phrased it was really important for people to hear, in terms of like people have this sort of religion mindset towards their training, also with their nutrition. It's like,
especially with nutrition,
which is really interesting. People get way more emotionally invested in nutrition. To like have someone disagree with you on nutrition, they get their venom out. They go really crazy. But I think the best coaches are the ones who tend to be like, listen, let's find what works for you, whatever that may be. And also, not only that, what works for you now might not be the best for you in 3 years, and that's okay. And let's like learn how to like recognize what's good for you, and then also recognize how to adjust as time goes on.
Yeah, the way I look at it is it's like a tool belt, and you have all these different tools, and there's times when you use your hammer, and there's other times when you use a screwdriver and your wrench.
I like that.
And things change. Your body changes, your goals change. And some tools are great for some things and not so great for other things. So when you look at kettlebell training, or you look at powerlifting, or look at bodybuilding, they all have their potential benefits, and some of them are better at some things than others. And just mix them up and use them accordingly. And I think this is a message that needs to be spread a little bit more, because the average person isn't the extreme bodybuilder or the extreme powerlifter. The average person just wants the overall fitness and health.
Yeah, 100%. I loved what you brought up too, about workouts, like online, and what people are kind of putting out there as far as like Instagram, like here's your workout of the day. But you have a different approach for that, as in terms of like how you would take somebody through a workout, and what precedes that, and like, can you get into that a little bit?
So how I would take someone through a workout?
Yeah, like in terms of like, so everybody's putting up like a workout of the day, but you have a hard time in terms of like, as a trainer, considering all the variables that go into that. And I think a lot of people don't understand like the trainer brain in terms of like, well, yeah, you could do just a workout in general, but in terms of programming, what does that look like?
Yeah, so I mean, actually, did you hear me talk about that with Joe DeFranco?
I did, yeah. I did, and I love that discussion. I wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, so basically it was... you have that issue where like, it's on one hand it's great. You have coaches putting up workouts for people to try on Instagram and stuff. It's you can see people scroll through Instagram. Oh, I'm going to try that workout today. It's great. It's something is always better than nothing. It's fantastic. And this is something that I think is sort of missing now among coaches, is when I first started getting into training it and really like understanding the science behind it, I would spend like years studying programming and periodization, understanding individualization, what works for one, like how to literally program per person, per individual, based on how they're built, what their goals are, all this stuff. So you sort of run into an issue where if you're getting into higher level periodization as a coach, it's almost like it's almost disingenuous. It's all like very difficult for me just to put one workout and be like, just do this. It's like, but what came before it? What comes after it? Why this now? Like, where are you in a certain phase? And that's sort of that's almost in I think on some ends, like the curse of knowledge, where it's like, so much that it might be preventing you from actually helping more people, just from like sort of dumbing it down for a minute. But also on the other hand, there has to be sort of a standard by which coaches can really start to understand that you have to learn more about programming and periodization. You have to really spend time understanding the best workout isn't just the best workout is really dependent on the one that came before it and the one that's coming after
it. Absolutely. One thing that really irritates us quite a bit is people will cite a study and say something like this, in your program you have one of your phases has us training in the 2 to 5 rep range, but studies show 8 to 12 reps builds the most muscle. So why would you put that phase in? It's like, okay, if you always train the 8 to 12, guess what rep range is going to build more muscle? The one that's not 8 to 12. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
But people don't understand that, and it's a difficult thing to try to communicate that, which is obviously why we started this podcast. So I
remember too, like clients would come in and bring their friend, and then they're just like, yeah, well, they could just come in and join the workout. What's wrong with that? And I just had the worst time with that, because it's like, I don't know anything about them, and you're just throwing them out there, and it's like, it was a struggle because you know too much, right?
They're like, they can just join the workout, but by the way, also they've had like MCL surgery.
Right. Oh, I forgot to mention. Yeah.
And they also don't want to they don't have the same goals as I have, so but they could just do the same thing, right? It's
it's fine.
Yeah, workout's a workout. Yeah. So how did you end up meeting Gary? How did that process start?
So that started because it's actually a crazy story. I started my website when I was at Westside Barbell. So in 2011, basically I went to Westside, and this guy that I worked with, JC Dean, he was like, what are you doing? I was like, I'm at Westside Barbell. He's like, what? He's like, you should get a website and just write about it. And so I was like, okay, so I don't know how to get a website. So he bought my website for me, transferred me all the information. And I was like, what do you want me to do? He's like, I just want you to write. Just like write about what you're doing, what you're learning, just write. So I did that. And I wrote a bunch, but one of the major things was about the Westside conjugate method. Like if you search the Westside conjugate method, this article is the first one that comes up, like from 2011, because it like really broke it down. So it wasn't like Louis does it all the time, but Louis is like super hard to understand. Louis sort of like contradicts himself sentence after sentence. So I like went step by step and explained it and did really well. But basically I started writing at least one article a week every week from 2011 and doing YouTube videos and stuff. And so Gary's previous coach, Mike Vicanti, followed my work, and I didn't know him at the time. He wasn't even a coach. He was like an accountant in Minnesota, and so he commented on one of my articles in 2012. I responded back, but this is before he coached Gary, before he was a trainer, and he'd followed my work. So through a crazy chain of events, he ended up becoming Gary's coach. Several years later, after he began coaching, he interned with John Romanello, and then when Mike's time was up, Gary was like, "Who's going to be my next coach?" And Mike was like, "I think I know a guy." And it was mainly just because he started following me early on, following my content, interacted with me.
Wow.
And then Mike said so Gary was in a lot of pain. Gary had a lot of hip pain, a lot of neck pain, a lot of shoulder pain. And basically he liked that I had trained at Cressy and knew that side. So basically because he knew who I was and we'd interacted and knew that like I had a knowledge and understanding of the body and human movement, that was sort of why he recommended me.
Now, did you do that initially, the website and the YouTube? Did you do that initially with the intention that it was going to become a business?
No, I had no idea that it was going to. I didn't know it. I didn't know online coaching could be a thing. I didn't know like literally, I was just like, why am I starting a website? And he's like, just write, just tell your story, what you're learning about, just teach people. And I was like, cool. So literally, and it was great because it helped me learn, right? So every time I would write an article, whether it was about like muscle fiber type or whatever it was, I would have to research it. And then I would spend a time reading articles, reading books, and I would write about it. And I would get like 20 views a day, 10 of which were from my mom. And just like I had no foresight to think like this is going to be a business, but it was fun for me and I enjoyed it. And then I think that's probably why it became a business, is because I think one of the reasons a lot of coaches fail building a business nowadays is because they make one Instagram and post and they're like, why don't I have any clients yet?
Right.
They're like, I make one video. It's like, why don't I have any clients yet? It's like their intent is solely based on getting something in return in terms of, I want to get a client, so I'm only making this piece of content so that people will then become my client. And they're like, why am I doing all this stuff for free if no one's becoming my clients? Like, maybe, do you enjoy it? Like, is it helping people? Like, is that your only reason for doing it? And it took me a long time before anyone even started to say like, hey, can you write my programs? And for the first, I didn't know PayPal existed. I was like, I'll do it for free. And it was just because I had no idea business was possible.
Do you think that there's a common misconception, just because things now are online, that some of the old business rules don't apply? Like the old rules of business were bust your ass, work real hard for a long time, then you'll make a lot of money and be successful. Do you think a lot of people think, oh, it's online, it's fast, I'm just going to make an Instagram and then tomorrow I'll just start selling stuff?
Yeah, I mean, realistically, I think that starting a business, unless you've started a business and own a business, I think that people have no idea what the hell goes into it at all. I mean, even in the old days. But I think now that it's online, I think there's even a bigger misconception that like, oh, it's just online. Like, I mean, even my mom still doesn't really understand what I do. She's like, she's like, she doesn't have Instagram, so she doesn't understand that. She doesn't like, I mean, she goes on my website sometimes, like, sometimes she'll watch my YouTube, but she just sees me posting funny videos sometimes and she'll be like, I don't understand how this works. Like,
how do you make money?
This is business?
This is weird.
Yeah, it's like, why you have a wig on and like you call yourself Kenzie Morgans. Like, what is going on? So I think that people have a very skewed misconception of how quickly it takes and how much effort goes into it. And I think that's one of the reasons why there's so much burnout, because they go into everything with the expectation of like, okay, I'm going to make like a couple. I get DMs from people be like, hey, do you have any advice? I've really been trying to grow my Instagram and it's not working. And I go and look at their page and they have 4 posts. I'm like, all right, do like 2,000 more. And then, like, then we'll talk.
Exactly.
So did you tell Gary Vee that to help his neck and his back out, he's got to work on all the time when he's on his phone? I mean, I would imagine that's probably like the number one thing that you have to combat is like how much he's probably rounded over on his phone or
It
computer.
was one of the first things that we did, is because it wasn't even just how much time, it was just how he actually was posturing himself while he did it. And he was always down here where his neck would just drop, and like I can't even do it with the microphone, but it was just, he would let his head drop and he almost like shot his neck forward in a very forward head posture position and then down. And his neck pain was so bad that his assistant every time he booked him on a flight, he could only book him on the left side of the plane because he couldn't tilt his head this way. Like his neck was, he literally it did not have the mobility to bend his neck that way. So he could only, if he was going to sleep on the side, he had to go that way. So I remember like one of the first things we did was if I touched his neck, literally just like touched it, he would shudder and pull away because there was so much pain. So just a little bit of soft tissue work there with teaching him how to like, instead of doing this, just keeping your chin tucked, just just simple like just neck exercises in the warm up can do a lot. Just a couple simple like chin tucks, and then with some soft tissue work, like helps a ton.
Now I'm actually really fascinated and interested in this topic because I have a theory that in the next 5 to 10 years, this is going to be one of the number one conversations within the fitness or the trainer coach community, and that's because we've never seen a generation that was born with the iPhone and for 10, 18, 20 years of their life being rounded forward. And I see kids all the time now, and everywhere I go, they're attached and they see that forward head, chins down, and they're looking at their phone, rounded posture. And I just don't think that we have any idea what the consequences of that, like from a posture standpoint, and what that's going to look like for these kids that are 4 or 5 or however early the parents introduced them to iPads and iPhones, and then now them at just teenage years and young adulthood. Like, what do you think about that?
I couldn't agree more. And I think you're going to see not only just neck issues, but then from forward head posture, we'll see some shoulder issues as well, because we're going to have like seriously rounded upper back, and then people are not going to have enough shoulder mobility, and then that'll make its way down to the hips. And like, there's definitely going to be downstream effects from this for sure. And I think, and not to mention, they're spending so much more time on these devices that they're definitely not outside playing as much. Mm-hmm. They're definitely not outside moving as much. So I think that the effects of it will be very significant. And I don't know if it'll be easy to just pinpoint, well, it's because of this or because of that. But I would be very interested to see what percentage of people are going into a physical therapy appointment now with neck issues versus in 10, 15 years, how many people are going in with neck issues. And I would imagine that we're going to see a significant upward trend of people with neck issues going in.
Right. Didn't you reference a study, Sal?
Yeah, I read a few articles that showed that there was a spike in back pain and neck pain among kids, which that's a population that never experienced back or neck pain unless it was an injury from playing. They never had those issues, and now they're having all these problems, which, we have a lot of trainers that listen to the show, and I would say if you're a new trainer and you want to increase how valuable you are to the market, I would spend some time learning correctional exercise for those things. It'd probably provide a lot of value.
It's one of those things where I'm thinking practically what's going to work the best. I know a lot of coaches that are like, they're going to say things like, well, stop spending so much time on your phone. It's like, okay, but they're not going to stop spending so much time on their phone. So what do you do? It's like actually teaching them how to, number one, posture while they're doing it. And number two is actually strengthening their neck muscles so that it will sort of balance itself out. I think specific neck exercises are going to be super important. And it's actually one of the things Joe DeFranco does a lot. He has that, I don't forget what the thing is called, but he has a specific apparatus just for your neck training, which he uses a lot for football players and stuff like to help avoid concussions.
That called? Not a halo. I forget what that's called. But yeah, I know what you're talking about.
It is amazing.
Yeah.
And and I know a lot of wrestlers use that type of stuff, football players. And I think that type of tool, and even just like literally something as simple as chin tucks, just doing it in your warm up every day, doing it when you wake up every day will make a huge difference.
Mm-hmm. Now, were there something like, I imagine you get somebody like Gary Vee. One, are you nervous the first time you
petrified?
Yeah, as I say,
petrified.
What was that like? And then was there like a defining moment of you teaching him something where he's like, okay,
he's
Jordan,
bought in.
Yeah, you're my guy. Like, was there something like that?
Well, I think that happened in the interview. So I was living in Israel at the time, and basically Mike was like, would you want to coach Gary? I was like, is this serious? Like, is this a joke?
Like, for sure.
So I flew from Tel Aviv to New York for an interview, and I coached Gary for an hour. And I just took him through a standard warm up. And I use a lot of yoga based movements in my warm ups. It was about 7 to 10 minutes. And Gary was super stoked about it. He's like, I love this. This is great. He's like, I feel awesome. And I don't think any of the other coaches who interviewed with him did that type of stuff, because he's like, man, like, this is what I need. Mm-hmm. He's like, and he was super excited about it. And I was like, man, this is just like the world's greatest stretch type movement, just like simple stuff like yoga plex, some T-spine rotations. And he was just like, oh, I feel great. Literally within 7 minutes, I was like, nice, all right, let's go.
Done deal.
Then the other thing at the end of the workout, I said, before he did the last set, best set, he was like, last set, best set. I like that. And he was like super amped up about that. And so I think that's like when he was super excited. And then when I was like, all right, I got the job. I came and I remember I was petrified. I was scared out of my mind. And the thing for me is I've never had an issue telling a client what they need to work on, what they need to improve. But with him, I was scared to. Like to tell this guy who I followed for years, I was like,
yeah, your posture sucks.
Yeah,
dude.
this isn't good. But I remember I think it was probably the third or fourth session in, I was like, he tried to do a single leg RDL. Balance was awful, like absolutely terrible. And he was like, how was that? I was like, well, and he was like, did that suck? I was like, yeah, it sucked. and he goes, good. He's like, I want to know that because he's like, I like knowing what I suck at because that means that I have something to improve on. Right. And from that point on, I had no problem being like, yo, that was really bad. Like, because I could sort of use that to motivate him. And or one of the things that almost in a different aspect, one of the things I always like to do, and I don't think he listens to these, so he's never like, I've never given it away. But sometimes I'll be like, all right, so we're gonna do this variation of this exercise, and we'll do one set. And if I can see that he has more in him, but he's being a little bit lazy, I'll be like, all right, we'll stick with this. This is the beginner variation. We'll just stay here. He's like, no, what's the more advanced one? And I'm like, no, I don't know if you want that. It's a little bit. He's like, I can try it. Let's go. And so then he'll, all right, cool. We'll give that a shot.
How important so you just glazed over that, but it's such an important thing for trainers to understand. There's that psychological piece.
It's everything.
Knowing how to communicate to your client to get them to
the hot buttons.
Yeah, but earlier you were talking about how some trainers are afraid to do what their clients need to do and rather give them what they kind of want. It's the skilled trainer that can get the client to want to do what they're supposed to do.
Right. That's exactly right. You said that so literally just my hair stood up. Like that's exactly right. It's being able to get your client to want what they actually need.
Right, right. Now, how do you see that today with other trainers? I mean, because what I see a lot of times is other trainers just have they focus so much on learning new techniques for exercise, learning correctional exercise, getting all these certifications, terrible at communicating to their clients.
Awful.
Just not good. How important would you say the communication piece is?
Honestly, I think communication is man, I might go back on this later, but I think communication is more important than really understanding periodization at a really intensely high level.
Sure.
I mean, like understanding periodization, but for me, I've always been like the best program followed inconsistently will yield worse results than like a decent program followed 100% consistently.
You literally just quoted us. Yeah. We say that all the time. Right. Yeah, we say that because again, it's getting that buy-in is the most important thing because the biggest stumbling block for most people is just not doing it.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
It's exactly right.
Now, one of the things that's really cool, and we talk about this on the show, I mean, much of my education has come from just being blessed to have trained hundreds and hundreds of CEOs and entrepreneurs. Like, what was it like training Gary, and like, what have you learned from him?
Oh man, what I've learned from him could fill a library. I mean, I've learned a lot from him, and I think, oh man, well, we'll say one of my biggest takeaways that a lot of coaches and personal trainers really appreciate hearing is, so I used to get super upset when people would like leave hate in my comments or just unnecessary. Like, and it's not like disagreements, just like super obnoxious, hateful comments. And Gary, just watching him handle his social media in person is very interesting to me. It's like watching his demeanor and watching how he handles people who disagree with him or leave unnecessarily mean or hateful comments. And I remember asking him one time, I was like, do you ever get mad at these comments? He's like, no. I was like, no. But like, really? Do you ever get upset? He's like, no. I was like, why? He's like, think about it like this. If someone is taking the time out of their day, if they have the time, they're literally think about what they're doing in their day. If they have the time to go onto someone else's page and leave a hateful comment, think about how sad that person must actually be, right? How unhappy that person must actually be. Like, just take a minute and really let that sink in of how in an unhappy of a place that person has to be. He's like, do you ever take your time to go on anyone else's page and leave a hateful comment? I'm like, no, I'm barely on anyone else's page, period. He's like, because you have good shit to do. Because you have like actual stuff that's helping people because you're spending your time making content. If you're spending your time looking at other people's pages and actually taking the time to leave a hateful comment, you are in a very bad place and you should feel terrible for that person. You should feel sympathetic for that person. You shouldn't be upset. You should take your time to say, hey, listen, I don't know what you're going through, but I'm always here for you if you need help. And that was a massive change for me mentally. Like, instead of being upset at them, like feeling sympathetic towards them and offering them my help.
Yeah, those are just miserable people.
Yeah, they are.
You were also one of the
sure.
first people that I ever saw do the fitness memes.
Yeah.
Is that what kind of took the Instagram off for you, or?
Yeah. So basically, when I started with Gary, I had around like 4,000, and I was posting 4 or 5 times a week, and it was just very half-assed. I thought I was working on it. I really thought that I was spending a lot of time on Instagram, but I wasn't. And so then I was about 6 months with Gary, and it hadn't grown that much, and because he doesn't really like push to me at all. Like, he was like, you have to work for it. And so on December, I think it was December 31 of 2016, he was like, you got to post 3 times a day every day. And I was like, 3 times a day every single day? And he was like, yeah. So then that was December 30th. And then December, that night, I posted twice. And the next day I go in, he's like, did you post 3 times yesterday? And I was like, yes. And he was like, no, you didn't. And I was like, damn it. So then from that point on, from December 31 through April, through more like June, I posted 3 times a day every day, with the exception of 2 Sundays when I posted twice. And so from December 31 to April 6th, my account about doubled, just 3 times a day every day, which was crazy. And then on April 7th, I posted my first infographic, and it exploded. It went I posted my first infographic, and it went viral, went bonkers.
Now, what gave you the idea to do that?
So basically, I was helping my friend Carter Good with his business, and I was like, you should start posting some calorie comparisons. And he did it in infographic form, and it went nuts. And so then he did that for 2 weeks, and I was like, man, I want to do the same thing. But I wasn't into the calorie comparisons. I was more like strength training and just more like information-based without just the calorie comparisons. So my first infographic was an explanation of strength versus hypertrophy versus endurance, and it went nuts. And then literally I saw that go crazy. So a couple hours later, I posted one. This is on Friday night when usually interaction is really down. I posted one on how sweet potatoes and white potatoes, they're not good or bad. Like, they both have their own benefits. And that one went bonkers. And literally they must have been hitting explore page, because just thousands of new followers in that one day. And so then I was like, all right, I'll just do these. So I did 3 of those a day every day for the better part of a year. And then it went from 6,000 it went from 14,000 to over 200,000 in that year.
Wow.
Wow.
Now you're spread over Twitter, YouTube, you've got a podcast, you've got the Instagram going, you're all over all these platforms. What are some of the things that you've learned about each of them through this process?
Well, that's a great question. I would say Instagram, it's it's sort of what you learn from it is in the name. It's very in the moment, Insta, like that. You have that one moment. A lot of people will see your content, but they won't even read the caption. They'll go through, they'll double tap it. It's a great place to reach a larger audience, to get a larger audience, and interact with people. But I think that podcasts, I think that long form YouTube videos, I think long form articles are massively underrated now. I mean, that's what sort of got me in the industry, is these long form 2,000 word articles. And I think a lot of people are so focused on getting these on the likes, whether on Instagram, getting more likes. They've just assumed that more likes equals more income and more reach. But I think that I would 10 times out of 10 rather have 100,000 on YouTube than 1 million on Instagram, because people who are willing to watch a 10-minute video or a 20-minute video are way more invested in you and what you have to say than the people who can barely read a full caption and just double tap it on the way down and go by. So I think that Instagram is a great place to reach new people and get attention, but to actually build a deeper relationship with your audience, podcasts, articles, videos, that's really where the major benefit is going to come.
Right.
Yeah, I would agree. And it's also harder to fake a podcast. It's easier to fake an Instagram.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, because you'll be talking for an hour. Instagram. We've met a lot of fitness influencers through Instagram, and you meet them and you talk to them this guy doesn't know shit about fitness.
That is so funny. I did with Anders from Barbell Shrugged recently. He said the same thing. He's like, it's crazy. You sit down with someone for an hour, they can't bullshit. They can't fake that anymore. It's crazy how many people they sit down with, and people just don't know what the fuck they're talking about.
So we've seen relatively recently, the explosion of the online coach, and a lot of that driven by social media. Do you think it's important for people to, when they hire an online coach, that coach had actually trained people in person?
I think that training people in person will make you a better online coach, but training people online will not make you a better in-person coach. And I think training people in person not only like they should, but it's essential. And if your coach hasn't actually trained people in person, if they even like when I was fully online, when I wasn't coaching Gary, I still train people in person. Number one, because I love it, but number two is because every time, like literally every session, I learned something new.
Right.
Every single time I coach someone in person, no matter how many years I've done this, I learned something new every time. Whether it's a new, it's funny, like a lot of people really like the cues that I use with clients. Like I put one up on Instagram yesterday or the other day, like showing your nipples to the wall on the deadlift, which people just thought was amazing. They're like, oh my God, how'd you think of that? I just thought of that because I've coached so many people in person. You try new things.
That's the one that worked.
It's the one that worked the best. And it's like, and it's funny because what I didn't say, and I didn't speak about this, is I used to use, if you had letters on your t-shirt, show me I would want to see the letters on your t-shirt. But when I used that, people would overextend too much. It would be too much of a hyperextension lower back. But when I said show me your nipples, they didn't go that much. And so that's why I chose that one instead of show me the letters on your t-shirt. And it's like you only learn that from coaching people in person. You can't do that from online.
So that's a hack that I was searching for from you too, that I remember we pieced together on YouTube was, I remember when I first got on YouTube, I was so, even myself, the part that I was nervous about was I was thinking about my peers. Like, oh, my peers are going to judge me. And we're going to get this constant back and forth on my way's right way, you're the right way. And I was worried about that. And it took about a year of us doing the YouTube before I finally fuck it. Well, I got to stop worrying about my peers and speak to the camera as if I was speaking to one of my clients and giving these tips like that.
Yeah.
And that's actually when the YouTube really started to take off was fuck the hate that I'm getting and the people that are talking shit to me that are my peers, the 100 trainers that are watching this.
Yes.
And let me speak to the average Jane or Joe, which I've been coaching to for over 15 years.
Exactly.
And that was a game changer for us. And when I look back at our videos that have got the most views that are in the millions or hundreds of thousands, it's some of the most basic tips that I was giving in there with advice like that.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's like worrying about what other coaches are going to say it's a terrible rabbit hole to go down. Because number one, they're not going to be the ones who are going to be paying you. They're not going to be your clients. Right. They're just looking for hate. They're just like looking to argue with people. And so, yeah, I mean, it's fun. I very much noticed the same exact thing when I stop worrying about what other coaches are going to think. And you can see this in a lot of coaches, and even in myself. If you look at my writing from 2011, 2012, 2013, I was using a lot of bigger terminology, not because it was necessary for the article, but because I wanted to sound smart. Right. So that when other coaches read it, they're like, oh, he knows what he's talking about. Right. He used the word anterior pelvic tilt. He knows what's up. Yeah. But it's like, that's literally just like me stroking my own ego to try and so that other trainers will be like, oh, they know what's up. But it's like, if instead of using anterior pelvic tilt, you're like, yeah, you don't want to stand like Kim Kardashian, then all of a sudden, like, all people are like, oh, I know what he means now, right? It's like, or like tuck your tail in like you're a sad dog. It's like, I didn't use posterior pelvic tilt, but I get like 10 out of 10 regular people know what the fuck to do.
Right. I think this is what stifles most coaches. I think you have this kind of this growth curve that you go through as a trainer where you come in and you don't know anything. And so you're not that great. And so you're not having a ton of success. And then you maybe put a lot of work into getting good and learning more and getting educated. And then you learn all this information and then you want everybody to know how smart you are. And so then you get stuck in speaking like that all the time and then you never grow beyond that. I feel like this is one of the most difficult things for trainers to understand is like to get out of your own way and learn how to communicate to your clients. Now, when you look at like all the different platforms that you're working, you're training Gary Vee, you've got all this content you're writing, like how are you scaling your business and what's like the future look like for you personally?
Well, oh man. So I have no idea what the future looks like. I'll be very honest with you. I have no clue. And people are always like, what are you going to do in 5 years? And I have no clue. Like, I have no idea. Literally every day I'm just throwing random shit at the wall and seeing what happens. Fortunately, I love what I do, so it's amazing. In terms of scaling my business, when I first started doing online coaching, it was just one-on-one because it's all I knew how to do. Is I didn't really I had no business plan. I was like, all right, let's just work with people one-on-one because that's what you do. And then I realized, okay, like there are a lot of people who can't afford one-on-one, and there's only so many people I can work with before my quality as a coach declines rapidly. So then I was like, okay, I'll make like a membership. So I have this like Inner Circle membership, which is super affordable. And so that's really what I'm focused on building right now. So I'm doing that. And then other than that, I love speaking. I really like speaking. I want to do a lot of speaking engagements and go around and sort of educate coaches. I really do like to help coaches become better coaches. Yeah. Not only in terms of really like, here's one interesting thing. I see a lot of business coaches now coming out on Instagram and stuff like how to build. And one really interesting thing about this is they start essentially trying to relay information they've heard from Gary or from Andy Frisella or something. You could tell it's not their own information. Like they're just sort of spewing it back. And you see like their engagement drop massively. You see like a lot of like they're starting like to sell way more, like doing stuff that just doesn't really make sense. And there's always talking about business stuff. But what I've found is from the coaches that I've worked with and the coaches that I've helped is the more you make them better coaches, the better their business grows. So rather than just like trying to talk to them about sales funnels and sequences and doing all these like trying to like get all this like automation set up, you're just like, hey, let's like get you to be a better coach so you can teach people how to achieve their goals better, their businesses go up. It's like less talking about business, more talking about coaching, more talking about what you need to do to be a better coach, how to be a better communicator, learning how to like reading better books, motivational interviewing, learning how to actually assess people, how to actually program. Then all of a sudden their businesses go up, not because they're learning how to do sales funnels, but because they're actually learning how to help people better.
Dude, I think that's such a great point and a great topic, because something we talk a lot about is what we're seeing right now. And I don't know if you see the same thing, is this growth in these mastermind groups where these people on social media get a large enough following, you know, like let's say someone like yourself, 400,000, and then instantly I'm an authority on how to build a business. And if you don't know better, you may think that just because you have a few 100,000 followers on Instagram, this person must be making millions of dollars.
Right.
And then the next thing they pivot into is coaching others how to make $1 million. Yeah. And then the whole thing is built around these sales funnels and drops and traps and shit like that, versus figuring out how to add value into people's life. And a lot of the success of what we did here was that's how we led. We led with, okay, we're just going to pour so much good free content until people were literally trying to give us money. And that's how that was the day that we decided to monetize. No sales funnels were built yet. No idea of like how we were really going to make all this money. It was really like, hey, can we provide so much fucking value that people feel compelled just to give us money?
Yeah.
And that was a day. I remember we all walked in the studio, and we had been for about a year going like, okay, when are we going to turn this thing on? Like, when is it going to be a business and not just something we love doing and passionate about? And it was. All of us had come into work, and it's like, man, I'm getting emails every day of people saying, hey, can you guys start a Patreon, or can I give you money?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, now we have a business. And this is the advice that I give to trainers when I get a lot of them asking me, like, you know, how do we build this business and what do we do? And I said, listen, your goal should be to add so much value to these people's lives that they feel compelled to give you money. And then you know you have something on your hands.
It's a really good point. And I think a lot of people overlook it. And one of the most common rebuttals that coaches will give when they're nervous about it, like, well, if I give them everything, why would they pay me? And I think one of the best pieces of advice I ever got was people aren't paying for coaching, they're paying for coaches. They're paying for you. Like if they could get a program on Google, they could get a program from any coach, they could go for the lowest cost, but they're going for you, the coach, because they trust you. And it's like, and the only way to build trust is to give them everything you know.
Yeah. So good.
What are some of the most important things that you want to communicate to coaches to make? Because you were talking about you want to go and make better coaches. What are the things that you want to talk to them about?
You know, I think I would go back to communication. I think I would really go back to communication. And have you guys read Made to Stick?
No.
It's by Chip and Dan Heath, two of my favorite authors of all time. Incredible. Made to Stick. They have a brand new book out. I think it's called Moments. And they are extraordinary. They do a great job of breaking down the science of a lot of behavioral psychology and a lot of like why people do certain things, why they behave to certain things. And Made to Stick is basically a book about why certain phrases or sayings or ideas are sticky, why they stick with you for life. So for example, breakfast like a king, lunch like a prince, dinner like a pauper. It's one of those things where it's like, why have you guys ever all heard that before? Yeah. It's like, why is that so sticky? Like, why is that like for generations, even though it's not even accurate? And like we know that now, but why is that so sticky? Why is that always going to be like passed down for generations? And it's sort of the science behind learning about how to take a topic and break it down into a very easily digestible, understandable, and like sticky thing that people will always remember. And so one of the things I always look for in my comment section is for people to be like, oh my God, I'm always going to remember this now. Sort of like show your nipples to the wall for the deadlift. That people are like, I'll never forget that one. It's like they might forget like, hey, like good posture or like whatever the cue you may use, but like how can you get better at communicating in a way, not only just so in the moment they get it, but so that they will remember it forever and they internalize it. And so that book I think was a huge game changer for me in understanding not just strategies to make ideas sticky, but actually understanding the value in making things sticky. Because when you understand the value in it, then you actually spend your time trying to make things, to express things in a way that people will really internalize forever.
Excellent. So communication, what else? What are the other things you like to communicate to trainers to make them better coaches?
I would definitely say programming and periodization.
Yeah.
I mean, programming and periodization, because man, it's bad. It's really bad. They have no idea what you don't know what you don't know, right? And I mean, I would say, practical programming is a great place for people to start. I think it's just a good, solid book for people to understand. I think Ripido's done a really good job with like starting strength and all that. Like, just a good beginner. I wouldn't pay attention to the nutrition section of that book at all. I don't think GOMAD is a really good thing for anybody to do. But I think that he did a really good job of outlining the basics and understanding what you need to know. I think if you want to get more into the science and practice of strength training by Zatsiorsky is one of the best books anybody could read. That's one of the books that, like, you'll have to read one page 4 or 5 times before you can go to the next one, but super valuable and really important. I think, and Bampa has a number of books. Periodization Training for Sports is probably one of my favorites. That's if you really want to train athletes and understand athletic training, and also, even if you don't want to train athletes, but you want to learn. I think what that book did for me better than any other book was really understand the value of laying out of a periodized program and seeing, like, okay, so like this is the phase 1, this is the phase 2, this is the phase 3, and then also working backwards. So you start from the end point and then you periodize in reverse rather than starting from the front, and sort of understanding how you can map out the program and understand. Then you can really see, like, okay, well, the only way this phase will work is if you properly periodize beforehand and if you plan like properly for afterwards. So that's really what I would say for that.
Yeah.
Now, you have a unique way that you started training in terms of like seeking out like some of the best gyms and the best coaches out there to learn from and like really go through this sort of mentorship, apprenticeship type of a program. Is that something that you would recommend to somebody that's first like wanting to start off as a personal trainer?
Yeah, I think interning at a gym, even if it's not an amazing gym, I think just learning from people in person and getting practical experience coaching people is the best thing you can do for sure. I got really hated on for saying this, but I think most certifications are bullshit. I really do. I think most people spend way too much time and money on getting more certifications. They could put more letters after the name in their Instagram profile if that's going to make a fucking difference. And the reality is, like, if you spend more time interning at a gym, you're going to get a lot more benefit.
I think I agree with you 100%. I think there's value in certifications, but I think you're not going to learn nearly as much as you'll learn working with people, just training people, learning from other trainers who've trained lots of people, which is why, and I'd love your opinion on this, I typically, when trainers or people who want to become trainers, when they ask me, like, where should they start, I typically tell them to start off in a big corporate Globo gym, like a 24-Hour Fitness or an LA Fitness. And the reason why I say that is the
diversity,
the sheer amount of volume of people that they're going to see.
Absolutely.
Okay, so you would agree with that?
I agree with that, and because the volume of people, and because they're going to learn a ton from working with those people, and when you work with those people, like, they're going to follow you.
Sure.
They'll come with you. It's like a lot of people don't realize an in-person business builds an online business if that's the route you want to go. An online business doesn't, it can build an in-person business, but I think I have clients that work with me still one-on-one today online that started working with me when I was 16.
Wow.
It's like they will follow you. When people find someone that will go out of their way to make sure that they have a great program and that they care about them, they stick with them.
That's the irony of the trainer, like, sales cycle. Is like, you got to really learn how to market and sell in the beginning. Then you get so good that you kind of don't need to anymore. It just, you got the same clients, people refer people to you, and you don't need to worry about prospecting like you used to.
Yeah, and I think people, they're so focused on learning how to, like, sell better, they don't realize that if you get people better results, you don't have to sell.
Right. No.
It's like you have a referral network of people who will sing your praises louder than any sales market, any funnel you could ever make. Like, I think that a word of mouth business is the best business you can build. That's like the ultimate business if you actually are worth your salt. If you're really good, then word of mouth will be plenty.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Now, you're obviously one of the more well-known trainers. We think you're one of the very few people out there that are promoting good information when it comes to fitness. But along the way, along your career, I'm sure you've made mistakes like all of us.
Huge.
What are some of the biggest mistakes you've made?
Oh, man, let's see. All right. Well, when I was a teenager, I was super obnoxious to my mom about making sure she only bought organic. And she was like, outrageously expensive shit. She was supporting my brother and I by herself. Just like, I was like, Mom, I'm not eating anything unless it's organic. And she was like, you're really making this difficult.
I want organic popsicles. I don't want the conventional.
It was like organic milk, organic for everything. And like, she did it. Like, God bless her. She really she did not have any extra money, and I don't know what she sacrificed in order to make that happen. But like, that's one of the things that like I always have like a deep pit of regret in my stomach. Like, no, like we need organic stuff. Like, it's super important. Like, and it's just like obnoxious about it. And so that was one of the biggest mistakes I made. I just like regret, treating my mom poorly on that front. And then let's see. I mean, I think it's interesting. You were talking about how we get into these sort of really dogmatic stances, and it's when you're learning about stuff, right. When you're learning about it and you want other people to know how smart you are, I think that's when you really get into this, like, you're going to fight to the death about it. And I think any time when I was getting into kettlebells, I was like, you learn, well, there's the RKC way, and then there's this way. And then when you're getting into powerlifting, there's like the Westside way, but then there's like this way. It's like, along the way, every stage of my career, every stage of my learning, I've found myself in, well, it's either this way or that way. And almost every time I've learned something new, I've been like, this is the way. And like, that's my stance. And only once you, number one, try everything, and number two, really like you get to a point in which you understand that everything works, can you start to be like, okay, like relax. It's all right, like stop. Like, you don't have to get so emotionally invested or upset about every time someone maybe says they have a disagreement. Like when I was younger, I was so quick to get like so defensive about whatever it is that I was doing, that it would sort of, number one, it would definitely push people away, but it would keep me from learning. Right. So I think like probably being able to sort of step back, let the other person talk, and understand, listen, consistency is more important than whatever method you're using. Sort of that's how I judge methodology at this point. It's like, everything works for a certain amount of time. How long can you maintain this? And that's really the most important.
Yeah, that's what I would say.
I feel like that carries into nutrition, which we haven't talked a lot about too. I mean, I feel the same thing about training that I feel with nutrition. You get somebody who, a client or a trainer who ends up trying keto, and it just was life-changing for them, right? It just changed their life. Like, they have their gut issues are gone, and they feel great and feel amazing. And so now they push keto on everybody, and they talk about how amazing the ketogenic diet is. And the same thing for vegan, the same thing for intermittent fasting. Like, you get the people that try these ways of eating, and then all of a sudden they become so dogmatic about it. And until maybe you go through all of them yourself and you start to realize, like, oh shit, maybe it's not the diet, maybe it's because I was eating something that I probably shouldn't have been eating, and now that I'm not, I feel so much better. Talk about your journey in learning that through nutrition, because I know you kind of talk about this too.
Yeah, so I mean, I started intermittent fasting when I was a teenager because of my wrestling coach. So I did the warrior diet when I was 18. 17, 18, and super, like, that ended up, wrestling combined with that ended up having some serious eating disorders, like having like serious anorexia, had a little bit of bulimia at some points. Not like ridiculous, I never had to go to a therapy place, but wrestling isn't the best for developing a healthy relationship with food. And so from that, I got super dogmatic about intermittent fasting. And the crazy part about that was, I remember when I decided, I was like, I need to stop intermittent fasting. Because basically I realized that what I was doing, and I wrote an article about it, I think it was 2012. Yeah, I think it was 2012, where I was saving all my calories for as late as possible, because I was like, if I save my calories, then I'll be able to eat a ton at one point. And like, my whole purpose was to get as full as possible. But I realized at a certain point, it was like, I could eat and just not get full. And a lot of people who struggle with binge eating, they'll brag about how much they can eat. Like, I'll never get full. Like, I can eat so much. And it's like, that's their way of sort of hiding behind this, like, covering up this fear that, like, well, that's a problem if you can't feel yourself getting full. I remember realizing that in 2012, and I was like, I need to stop. And I was so nervous, even though I knew that calories were most important, even though I knew that, I was so nervous to stop intermittent fasting, because in that emotional side of my brain, I was like, oh man, like I'm going to have breakfast now, which like when you say it out loud sounds ridiculous, but it's also one of the reasons why I think it's super important for people to speak about their anxieties out loud. People just keep them in their head and it's just an emotional turn wheel. But when you actually speak it out loud, it's like, I'm super nervous about eating breakfast. All of a sudden you're like, okay, well now I sound ridiculous. And so let's try eating breakfast. And literally through when I was intermittent fasting and I had serious anxiety around food and I couldn't get full, as soon as I started eating breakfast, it all went away. It just, that was it. I had to, because when you save your calories and you spend all day saving your calories for this one massive meal and that you don't even get full anymore, it's like it's a serious issue. So you just start off by like, I'm not going to save my calories anymore. I'm just going to eat in the morning. All of a sudden, like you start to feel yourself getting full again. You have a more normalized eating behavior.
Yeah, humans can pathologize anything. I mean, it doesn't matter what. I mean, there's people who eat their big meal in the morning and then don't eat the rest of the day and they fast that way. And, you can make arguments for either one, but we have a tendency we can make anything crazy.
Yeah.
Any eating style, any nutrition plan, anything, which is why, I try to stay away from hard rules. But there are some general rules, though, around nutrition. Are there general ones that you tend to tell people? Like, okay, here's generally what I like to tell people to do with nutrition, and then we can look at the details on an individual basis.
Yeah, generally, I like, listen, try and have protein at every meal. Try and, stay hydrated when you can. Try and drink first and foremost. I really do try and make sure people understand calories. I really do want to bring that home and understand the importance of really what calories are and how that works and sort of educating them on that, because once you understand the basics of how calories work and why they're important and the role they play, then you can sort of manipulate it however you want. If intermittent fasting works for you, great. Just don't forget about calories. If keto works for you, awesome. Just don't forget about the total calories. Like whatever it is, just always remember coming back to this. Whatever your meal frequency is, what foods you're eating, just let's make sure we're keeping your calories in check, getting significant amount of protein, and that's really the general rules.
Yeah, for me as a trainer, the one thing that I saw that made the biggest difference with clients, besides educating them on things like macros and calories, which I think is the basics, you got to kind of learn that, was to because the biggest hurdle for most people around nutrition is just that people have a tendency to want to overeat or eat too much, and so to get around that or to work around that, I used to have people avoid the most highly palatable foods, which were the heavily processed foods. They tend to, what I found, they tend to make us want to overeat. That's what they're engineered to do. And then a study comes out and they actually compared giving people unlimited food. One side had access to highly processed foods. The others were all whole natural foods. And the group that ate the highly palatable, highly processed foods consumed a significant amount more calories, even though neither one of them had guidelines. Just eat as much as you want.
Right.
And they found that made them eat more. So for me, when I tell clients, hey, avoid those heavily processed foods, that alone usually gets their intake to go down significantly.
For sure.
Yeah.
And it makes sense. And I think we talk about the mindset side a lot. I think, so one of the things I did, I think it was in 2013, is I made a nutrition course for all my one-on-one clients. And the first video in that course had nothing to do with nutrition. It was just it was basically saying, listen, no matter what happens, you can't fuck up. Just I don't care if you binge, I don't care if you eat a whole pizza, I don't care if you get ice cream, cereal, have a ton of beer, I don't care what happens, you didn't mess up. Because I think what happens is when people, when they feel like they screwed up, when they feel like they messed up, when they feel like they went off track, it's almost like, oh, well, what's the point? I'm just going to spend the whole weekend binging, I'll get back on track on Monday.
On again, off again.
And it's exactly right. And so when you sort of take away that excuse that they'll use, no longer can you say you fucked up because you didn't. I don't care, just next bite, you're back on track. Next meal, you're back on track. When you take away that excuse, all of a sudden it's like, listen, I had a whole pizza last night on Friday night, but Saturday morning I'm back on it. Rather than having the whole pizza set Friday night and then all day Saturday, all day Sunday, spend the rest of it just going off track because they feel like they screwed up. I'll just get back on track on Monday. It's like you just saved yourself an extra 7,000 to 12,000 calories, and you're in the mindset of I'm back on track, feeling good.
Or they overcorrect. The other side is they'll eat the pizza and they'll be like, I'm not eating anything.
That's right.
Tomorrow, and
That's
it's like
right.
they went off track with the car.
2 hours of cardio.
Yeah, the car starts fishtailing again a little bit, so they spin the other direction. We know what happens on
That's
the freeway.
a really good point.
Car spins in circles and you crash. So those are the two things I would see people do: is either, oh, I'm done, I fucked, that's it, I'm over, or I screwed up, now today I'm going to fast and not eat anything at all, and it becomes this binge.
Purge cycle.
Exactly.
Now, how many times have you had the client who's come to you that is trying to lose 30 or more pounds, and they have yo-yo dieted so many times that they are only consuming like 1,500 calories or less, and they're still hanging on to their body weight and not losing anything.
Constantly, but they're not actually. It's like they think they are. Like, I swear, I'm only eating 1,200 a day, and they're like, you can't fix me. I've been to everybody, and it's like I must have a hormone problem, must be my age, genetics. It's not going to happen, and with that, this is where communication really comes in, because a lot of coaches are just going to go they're going to go straight for the jugular, be like, you're wrong. Like, I know you're wrong. Like, you guarantee you're missing something. But if you sort of just let them talk and ask questions, it'll come out. So one of my favorite questions to ask in this is like, I'll let them talk, I'll let it get it all out. Be like, okay, so I understand that. So let me ask you this. If there's one spot in your nutrition that you think you're doing really well in, what is that? And if there's one spot in nutrition that you think you can improve, what would it be? And so the one spot and they think they're doing really well, they'll tell me. But the one that they improve, that's the important one, because they'll be like, well, sometimes on weekends, I think I eat more than I should. And like, I end up like maybe eating too much and I binge. And I'm like, okay, so like, how many calories do you think you might be eating? So, it's a lot sometimes. It's like, okay, so you're not eating 1,200 a day. They're like, well, no, not all the time. And so then all of a sudden they sort of start through talking and realize, well, maybe I'm not actually tracking as well as I think I am. And you sort of let them tell you that story rather than just being like, I know it's happening somewhere. I know it is. And then they get way more defensive.
Yeah. So is it in your experience that more often than not, it's a lack of tracking really well versus somebody who has slowed their metabolism down from yo-yo dieting so much?
Correct. I mean, in terms, if it's solely a metabolic issue, if it's not an actual, like if it's a thyroid issue, that's a problem. Like, you need to get your thyroid checked. You need to get a metabolic cart test. If those come back that you have an actual issue, then 100%, like that's something that we have to work with from a medication perspective with a doctor. But if those levels are all normal and they're totally fine, and if they've been eating low calories, they went super low calorie and their metabolism slowed down. I mean, research shows it doesn't take that long through eating a higher calorie diet to get your metabolism back up to normal. So like, usually they're just not tracking properly.
How do you talk someone to eating more calories when they're afraid to?
Oh man, that's tough.
Yeah.
That's really tough.
That's almost harder to get someone to do that than the opposite, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because the fear of getting fat can seriously overwhelm people and like bring a lot of anxiety with people. And because, I mean, yeah, it's tough. I think the thing with that is I found challenges work really well. So I found like, for me, if I just get one day, that's perfect. But sometimes I go for like a 7-day. Do you think that, for example, I had one woman recently who was like petrified of carbs. She's like, I know they're not going to make me fat. I know it, but I'm petrified of it. And like, I tell my friends it's fine to eat carbs, but when it comes to myself, I'm super scared of it. And I was like, all right, well, how about this? How about for 7 days, you eat like 70 grams of carbs a day? Do you think you could do that? Just 70 grams. And if at the end of the 7 days, you gained a ton of weight and like, it's really bad, like then we'll go back. And she was like, okay, I can do that. So 7 days goes by and her weight like stayed within the normal range. She was like, okay. I was like, do you think we could do it at 80 grams for a week? Yeah, okay. And then it went to 100 grams. Then it went up to 120 grams. She was like, I feel great, energy for workouts. But these mini challenges really help people a lot because there's an end in sight. It's like even, and sometimes I'll just do a 24-hour challenge. I did the 24-hour challenges work for people who have trouble eating fewer amounts. Like a lot of people who are like, they're overeating, but they're not telling you, I'm like, do you think for the next day you could hit your calories 100%? You get 1,800 calories. They're like, yeah, I could do it. I'm like, 1,800. And then when they're like, I did it, you go over the top, super excited, like, fucking amazing. I knew you could do it. It's like, you think you could do it again? Yeah, I think I could do it again. And you just like go over the top, encouraging for them. So these challenges just to get people, because the thing is, a lot of people talk about motivation and they want to start with the motivation, but motivation isn't the first thing you start with. Usually what drives motivation is the action. So you get them to complete the action. Then once they've completed it and they feel, oh my God, I succeeded, boom, then you get more motivation. People try and get more motivation when before you usually just have to get them to complete something.
Mm-hmm. What do you say to clients who are like, I can't stay motivated all the time to work out forever. I just lose motivation. I'll be motivated for 3 months and then I'll just stop. What do you say to those people?
I'm like, yeah, join the fucking club. I get it. Like, I feel you. I definitely get it. And that's where I think it's like, what's realistic? Are you going to the gym 7 times a week? Is that what you're trying to do? Or 3 times a week would probably be better for you at that point. Maybe even 2 times a week, or go to 2 times a week and then go to a jiu-jitsu class or something. Like, find something else you enjoy. That's another sort of rabbit hole people go down. It's like, well, if I'm not actually lifting weights, then am I actually working out? It's like, there's so many ways to exercise. Like, let's not only think that doing 12 reps is the only way you could do it. Like, there's so many options. But I mean, I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions is people think that you're just always going to have motivation to go. It's just like, nope, that's just not the case.
Awesome. Now, you said you're out here because you're going to be training Gary in San Francisco. What do the workouts look like? Do you just follow like the hotel, whatever the hotel has, and you construct a workout around the hotel gym?
Yeah, so I mean, with Gary, it is crazy, man. And this is where we'll bring out the fancy name, cybernetic periodization, just going by how people feel. It's like is super important to understand, but it's an art to go by how people feel. What I'm lucky with Gary is that I coach him 7 days a week. Most people only see people 1 or 2, maybe 3 times a week at most. It's like, so with Gary, I have a lot of room to plug and play. So it's like, listen, this gym has nothing. You're tired of shit. You've barely slept over the last 2 days. We're just going to do like soft tissue work and some mobility versus, and then I can adjust the next day. But like, it's difficult if you only see someone 2 or 3 times a week and you really want to get that heavy workout in with them. So it is largely based on how he's feeling is most important. And like, I know if he's been going nonstop for 2 days and he's super exhausted, then like, I'm not even going to bother trying to get him to like do a leg workout. But if the gym is well equipped and he's feeling really good, then I can sort of adjust on the fly.
And this is in person 7 days a week? Mm-hmm. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So you're going all over the place.
Everywhere. If he's in Hong Kong, I'm in Hong Kong. If he's in LA, I'm in LA. Everywhere he goes.
Wow. What are some of the craziest places you've had to train him?
Hong Kong is my favorite. That was super fun. Yeah, that was really, really fun. The culture there was amazing. I just want to go back. I really like Belgium. Belgium was just super clean, really nice. The food was great. We go to London relatively frequently. He has offices there. But I mean, LA, he has offices there too, so we go there all the time.
Did you have any reserve? Because that's a massive commitment on your part, just to like, upend your schedule and follow him on all these trips and everything like that. Was that something that you really had to like consider and like think about for quite a while?
To be very honest with you, no, not at all. I was all in. And the way that I remember one of the conversations that changed my life, I was in college and I hated college. I hated it. I almost dropped out a couple times. Actually, the only reason I didn't drop out the first time is because Louis told me to come and train with him. I was about to drop out, and then I got that call. I literally had a one-way ticket booked back to Israel, and then he called me later that day, and he was like, "You're going to come." But when I was in college, and one of these times in which I really wanted to drop out, one of my really good family friends, he's a psychologist, he was like, "Listen, man, you've got about like 4.5 years or 3.5 years left. You just got to do it." And I don't really agree with it now, just thinking back to it. But the mindset he said, he was like, just think about you're in detention. You just got to sit, you're in detention. Like, it's going to suck, but you might as well have fun while you're there. Like, make the most of it. And it was a really cool mindset for me to have. I was like, all right, I'm just in detention. Like, I'm just got to sit here and fucking get through it. With Gary, it was a 3-year initial deal. And 7 days a week, like there was a huge commitment to it, but I was like, it's all upside. Like there's no downside to it. And it's like, what else am I going to do?
Yeah.
Like, at that point I was living in Israel, had an amazing like place. I was on the beach and I was relaxing. I was taking Hebrew classes and enjoying it. But I was like, am I just going to fucking sit here and then like see whoever else is coaching him and seriously regret not doing that? It was more just like, no, I'm all in 100%.
Now, did you negotiate at all, or did you let him close you on the first thing that he offered you?
There was zero negotiation. I was just like, whatever you say that's how it goes. I was like, I'm in.
No, that's a good attitude. I had an opportunity one time to do this. One of my clients had a record label, and they had an artist, and she was like up and coming, and they wanted to.
You might know her now. Her name's Lady Gaga.
It's kind of a big deal.
Definitely not anybody like that. But it didn't work out because one, I had a mortgage at that time. I was getting paid good money at 401k benefits, and I wanted too much money. That was the deal. Like, he was like, "Dude, I can't give you that." And they tried to sell me on the opportunity, and this person was by no means the size of Gary. So we went back and forth, and then it never happened. So you were going to do it no matter what. I
do this all the time. I did it like about a month ago. Actually, need to respond to the guy. Rico, remind me to respond to this guy. this guy in New Jersey was like, hey, we'd love for you to come speak to our company. How much would that cost? And I said a number, and he was like, man, I'm really sorry. Like, we can't do that. And I was like, okay, well, how about this number? And he was like, man, I'm really sorry, we can't do that. I was like, you know what, can you pay for lunch? And I was like, yeah, we can pay for lunch. I was like, all right, cool, let's do that. And like, that's literally it. I was like, I just want to do it. Like, I'm it's not so much like, of course, making money and so I can support my employees and support my family, it's important. But I mean, I also just love doing it. And so there's a certain point where I'm just like, I suck at negotiating. I'm just gonna do it.
Well, there's also a lot of, I think you're young, first off, you're still a young dude. But I think there's a lot of other value you get from working and training certain people.
Right.
Besides the money. Obviously, Gary, well connected. You probably learned a lot about building your own business, your social media and all that, because you're working with the guru of that right now. And I think a lot of nowadays you see a lot less people willing to do that, or at least they don't understand it. Like I know there's some people are saying that like free internships, those are wrong, those are bad. It's like they're learning some incredible skills.
Those changed my life.
Yeah,
those changed my life. It's like, it's almost like, why the fuck do you feel entitled to get paid?
Yeah.
It's like, I don't understand why. Mm-hmm. It's a very interesting mindset to me. It's like, it's just a massive, I don't even know if it's just short-sightedness or where that entitlement comes from.
It seems to be a generational thing. I feel like that the old ways it wasn't like that. I feel like, and it's interesting hearing you because you're the generation before us, and you definitely don't have that attitude. And we have some employees that are in that age group, and it is different. They expect like, oh, if I put all this work in, I should get paid. And it's like, well, what about the opportunity you have to be a part of this? And like, people would pay for that. I know some of the experiences that I had either working for a client or working for a business were more valuable than any certification or education that I got.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that they think
it's super odd to me. It's and I don't get it. And I'm always hesitant to blame something on like a generation, but I can't see another explanation for this because for other generations before me, like that was not like that at all. I was like, yeah, I'll work for free. I'll like get the experience. Like that's exactly what you would do. You'd work like with a mentor or whatever it was, like to learn how to like be I don't know, whether it's a barber, to be like someone like metal worker. Like you work for free, you learn from them as their mentor, and then you sort of gain their business. Right. And it's like, that's how it works. And now it's people like, why would I work for free? It's like, man, you are missing out on a lot of opportunity.
Yeah, I blame just bullshit, propaganda, some of it political, by saying, oh, this worker, or this interns are being exploited. No, it's voluntary. If they agree to be there, that means that they're getting something that is of value, more valuable than the work that they're putting in. And if the person is bringing them on, that means that they value their work more than the cost. And so that's it. And I think if we allow people to do that and stop demonizing some of these things, people will they'll increase their skills or improve their skills and become more valuable in the marketplace. And internships are incredible opportunities. When you're new and you have no experience, I mean, nobody's going to teach you more than a good mentor.
100%. That's why I ended up training Gary, is because Mike knew that I worked at Cressy Performance. I didn't get paid for that. It was 6 days a week, at least 6 to 8 hours a day. I was driving 45 minutes there, 45 minutes back. I didn't get paid at all. Yeah. But the reason I trained Gary is because Mike was like, Cressy is like the best with this, and I know Gary's got pain, and this guy interned with him, so that's what I'm gonna. In fact,
this is these are some of the things that I value that Gary talks about the most. Is we place such a high value on formal education. I think we've been, again, a lot of propaganda like, if you're going to spend $200,000 on getting a liberal arts degree, it's totally worth it. But if you go work for a free internship, but you go learn from somebody who's an incredible mentor, that's exploiting you. Doesn't make any fucking sense.
At all.
Doesn't make any sense.
At all.
Yeah.
It's a really good point. It makes zero. It's like completely illogical.
Absolutely. So anyway, thanks for coming on the show, man.
This was great.
Yeah, this has been great,
Thank
brother.
You so much.
We really appreciate what you're doing. We like to highlight people who we think are promoting the right information. There's a lot of shitty information out there, but like you said, I believe it's a net positive.
Some good lights out there.
And, people like you. So thanks
thank
for
you guys
coming
so
on.
much. It was a blessing. I really appreciate you guys.
No problem.
Thank you for listening to Mind Pump. If your goal is to build and shape your body, dramatically improve your health and energy, and maximize your overall performance, check out our discounted RGB Super Bundle at mindpumpmedia.com.
The RGB Super Bundle includes MAPS Anabolic, MAPS Performance, and MAPS Aesthetic. 9 months of phased expert exercise programming designed by Sal, Adam, and Justin to systematically transform the way your body looks, feels, and performs. With detailed workout blueprints and over 200 videos, the RGB Super Bundle is like having Sal, Adam, and Justin as your own personal trainers, but at a fraction of the price. The RGB Super Bundle has a full 30-day money-back guarantee, and you can get it now plus other valuable free resources at mindpumpmedia.com. If you enjoy this show, please share the love by leaving us a 5-star rating and review on iTunes and by introducing Mind Pump to your friends and family. We thank you for your support, and until next time, this is Mind Pump.